Market to Market is everywhere you are. Subscribe to Market on YouTube, find us on the PBS video app to stream on demand, and add our 3 podcasts on your favorite podcasting app.
Coming up on Market to Market, 2 economic partners meet on the global stage, working to understand the relationship between the U.S. and China, delivering an unusual package via the air.
Not necessarily.
And market analysis with Dan Hueber
A little bit
next.
of carry in the market. I think basis is going to have to come back after.
What's the most complex industry on Earth? It's not genetics, or meteorology, or logistics. It's a business that involves them all. It's farming. Thank you, farmers, from Pioneer.
Tomorrow. For over 100 years, we've worked to help our customers be ready for tomorrow. Trust in tomorrow. Information is available from a Grinnell Mutual agent today. This is the Friday, November 18 edition of Market to Market, the weekly journal of rural America.
Hello, I'm Paul Yeager. Last year, consumers were encouraged to shop early and often, as there were no guarantees on supply for the holiday season. Now, heading into the traditional gift-giving time of year, retail sales were up 1.3% in October after a flat reading the month before. The gain was attributed to car sales and higher gas prices. The core reading still added 0.9% when the gas and auto figures were stripped out of the report. Existing home sales fell for the 9th consecutive month, this time lower by 5.9% on the monthly comparison and 28.4% in the annual look back. Part of the supply chain entanglement of 2021 came from the huge numbers of ships from China waiting for unloading and distribution across the U.S. The trade relationship between the 2 largest global economies is usually listed as complicated. As U.S. administrations change in personnel and policy, China remains constant. David Miller explains.
Monday, President Biden held his first face-to-face meeting with President Xi Jinping of China. The 3-hour meeting included discussions on human rights, Taiwan, and pollution. Even though both sides clashed over the sovereignty of Taiwan and the rights of minorities in China, both sides agreed they would work to manage their differences in the competition for global influence.
The world expects, I believe, China and the United States to play key roles in addressing global challenges from climate changes to food insecurity, and for us to be able to work together. The United States stands ready to do just that, work with you if that's what you desire.
Biden has acknowledged Xi's One China policy, while at the same time committing to the protection of Taipei.
As leaders of the 2 major countries, we need to chart the right course for the China-U.S. relationship. We need to find the right direction for the bilateral relationship going forward and elevate the relationship.
However, relations between the 2 powers have grown more strained under successive American administrations over economic trade, human rights, and global security. Near the end of the week, former ambassador to China Terry Branstad, who established a close personal relationship with Xi while governor of Iowa, held a symposium on China.
Just as we don't want to lose the Chinese market for corn, soybeans, pork, beef, things like that.
Branstad believes the $600 billion in trade with the U.S., which includes the bulk of soybeans exported from rural America, is still important.
Well, first of all, I think the tariffs got their attention and led to the Phase 1 trade agreement. So I don't know without the tariffs if we would have gotten it, because administration after administration had tried to get these things done and not gotten them done. Now, hopefully, over time, we can see these tariffs lifted.
Speakers at the symposium made reference to Xi's statement about his ideology of capitalism's demise and the ultimate victory of socialism. John Pomfret, an expert on U.S.-China relations, believes business was the backbone of this country's relationship with China, but he says all of that is gone.
His perspective is that the future of the relationship, and the continued relationship between China and the capitalist world, which is the United States, is cooperation and struggle. And it's struggle for the inevitable victory of socialism over capitalism. And it's people say, well, he doesn't mean that, but this is a speech to party faithful that was kept secret for 6 years, that he made soon after, and he doesn't waste his time. And I think it's a clear elucidation of his views on the relationship. So I think he's in a Cold War with the United States, and the issue is whether we're going to be in one with him, and I think increasingly we are.
For Market to Market, I'm David Miller.
Insects can drive a farmer to the brink of frustration as an otherwise healthy crop is decimated by a small army of invaders. For produce growers, the fight is real and can be devastating. Now, advances in aerial support may help producers enter a new frontier of damage reduction. Colleen Bradford-Krantz reports in our cover story.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
This launch isn't shooting for the moon or a distant planet. No rocket boosters are needed. And the passengers inside? Insects.
We developed, in collaboration with USDA, a drone-based system for releasing sterile insects.
On a September day in western Michigan, the insects traveling during this routine drone launch by M3 Agriculture Technologies are codling moths,
6,400 moths.
the bane of existence for many pear and apple orchard owners.
Codling moth is really the worm in the apple. It's the primary pest. It's always been a nuisance for growers for the last 200 years in North America. It's the predominant pest worldwide. I think the only place where codling moth is not an issue or has not established is in Japan and some parts of Asia.
Codling moths have long been a foe at Hayden Farms of Pasco, Washington. But when the apple and cherry producers switched a half dozen years ago to organic apple practices, meaning synthetic pesticides were no longer an option, they struggled to keep control.
The major pest in apples by far is codling moth. And so when we first converted, we were clean. Coming from conventional to organic, we didn't have any codling moth problems. Then we had a neighbor that was organic and kind of got in trouble with the farm, and his control went to heck. A lot of problems, and those problems drifted over to us. We tried every means possible to control codling moths.
Hayden says they ultimately needed an answer beyond just natural oils and an insect virus spray. Those worked, but oils can only be applied a few times before harming the trees, and the viral spray needed to be reapplied repeatedly, driving their pesticide spending up. The viral spray also had to be consumed by the insects, meaning they would leave tiny bite holes in the fruit, known as stings. Inspired by Washington State University's research into sterilized insects as biocontrols in orchards, Hayden decided to give it a try, hiring M3.
We were really shocked the first year. We saw real good results. We still had some stings that first year with it. Since then, we have really been very clean. This year, I might have seen a couple stings all season in 125 acres.
Although drone delivery of insects is relatively new, sterile insect technique, or SIT, is not. SIT is a type of biological control, an alternative or supplement to chemicals, when managing agricultural pests like codling moth.
The insects that we release are sterilized. They're sterilized with ionizing radiation. And it damages their DNA to the point to where they're still viable as far as they're able to fly and they're able to act as insects. But when they mate with another insect, with a native insect that's out in the target environment, they will lay an infertile egg.
USDA has been using sterile insect strategies for decades, most notably when airplanes dropped sterilized pink bollworms, an insect that once devastated cotton crops all over the South. In 2018, USDA announced it had successfully eradicated pink bollworm.
The pink bollworm is officially eradicated.
Present in the U.S. ecosystem for more than a century.
Sterile insect technology is not a standalone technology in most cases. In the pink bollworm, we had a variety of technologies that we used. We hit pink bollworm with everything we had. You have to have a thorough knowledge of the insect's biology, its field behavior, and how it interacts with the host and all of its natural enemies.
After being awarded a grant, M3 began working with USDA in 2014 on developing a rapid response system in case of any small breakouts of pink bollworm. 4 years later, the Dayton, Ohio-based company got to work figuring out how to safely ship and store sterilized Mexican fruit flies, lady beetles, codling moths, and other insects from insect-rearing facilities before attempting to drop sometimes reluctant bugs from drones into treetops. The company designed its own drones and release devices.
When we went up to Washington and started releasing sterile codling moth, then we treated 50 acres. In 2019, we treated 1,200 acres, and that was our first year of commercial sales. Now we are at 4,000 acres in 2022 and growing quite nicely.
The company, now with 10 employees, has moved away from its previous dependence on government grants. Besides contracts in Washington, M3 now has customers in California, Idaho, and Michigan. Part of the reason for the growing enthusiasm among producers is that insects, just like weeds, develop resistance to pesticides.
For the majority of crop, especially apples and pears, there's no new chemical formulations coming online. There's no more being developed. It takes generally 10 years of a long pipeline, millions of dollars to develop different chemical formulations. We think that methods such as biocontrol using insects and such, those are going to become more and more popular.
I think there are a lot of options with SIT, and I think it depends a lot on the pest you're talking about and the crop and just the setting for exactly where and what you have to work with.
Altitude is 30.
Various studies estimate the value of natural biological control of native pests in U.S. crops at between $1.7 billion and $5.5 billion. A Canadian facility is the only large-scale insectary rearing sterilized codling moths. Crumpets expects demand to grow for other insects, especially predatory mites that feed on two-spotted spider mites, which are harmful to crops like hops and strawberries. Also, green lacewing, which eat other harmful aphids, show promise for many specialty crops, including fruits, nuts, and marijuana.
The big issue that we face is the supply of insects long term.
For Market to Market, I'm Colleen Bradford Krantz.
Next, the Market to Market report.
The Black Sea region dominated the headlines and the trade for the week. The nearby wheat contract was even, while the December corn contract added 15 cents. Outside markets and major weakness in the vegetable oils limited the soy complex. The January soybean contract improved a nickel. December meal gained $6.30 per ton. December cotton decreased $1.22 per hundredweight. Over in the dairy parlor, December Class 3 milk futures gained a penny. The livestock market was mostly lower as December cattle was even. January feeders cut 92 cents, and the December lean hog contract lost 65 cents. In the currency markets, U.S. dollar index dropped 129 ticks. December crude oil fell $6.53 per barrel. COMEX gold weakened $7.50 per ounce, and the Goldman Sachs commodity index lost almost 19 points to finish at 616.75. Joining us now to provide some insight, one of our old regulars, Dan Hueber. Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Black Sea region instability. It seems like we've talked about this a lot. The wheat market this week specifically, it seemed to be very sensitive to, do we have a deal, do we not, on allowing these exports.
Sure.
How much longer will that story hang over this market globally?
Well, I mean, until this war is finally settled or there's some kind of a peace arrangement, it's always going to hang over because it's, we say one thing, we do another. But I mean, realistically, every time we get a news story now, the impact seems to be a little bit more muted. So I think, we've grown accustomed to it enough. Then we know bushels are still moving. They're significantly less than, of course, they would have been in any normal year. But sure, I mean, we'll get little blips here and there. I mean, 2 weeks ago it was, well, we're gonna back out of the agreement. Well, we rallied for a day, and then pretty soon that was forgotten about. And here this week, well, we have an agreement, so markets broke a little bit, but then came back. So like I say, I think they're really just kind of grown a little bit tired of getting whipsawed around by those kind of news stories.
Domestically, we're set for a whole bunch of snow in Buffalo. That's pretty far from wheat country.
Certainly.
But it's cold in wheat country with no snow cover. That's why I bring up the snow.
Oh, sure.
Are we more sensitive now domestically to the weather story?
Well, I think if we were more of a dominant player in the world wheat market, that would probably be a yes, but we're not. I mean, we're a bit player. I mean, we're a residual supplier when need be. So yes, we add into the overall world picture, but Argentina's issues are probably just as critical as ours are this year. I mean, they've had a really difficult beginning to the growing season. Their wheat crop is not looking too good down there. But overall, Europe looks like it's getting off to a good start on winter. I think the French today rated their winter wheat planted 98% good to excellent. So it's a lot of parts of the world are looking pretty good.
Which wasn't the story last year.
Oh, no.
It was very poor, dry conditions. Let's go to corn.
Sure.
That was the market that looked like it was going to have the best week, and and the numbers played out. December corn up 2%. 15 cents.
Sure.
The harvest low in, Dan?
I think temporary low. I mean, it's not that it at some point down the road we won't be able to go lower than this, but I think we pushed down. We tested some pretty good support. Really, if you went back to about Wednesday this week, it was kind of questionable. It looked like corn could even break down another 15 or 20 cents. Was able to recuperate and then finish the week strong. So certainly, I think it says we probably have that year end, that harvest low. Bounces back up maybe into December, possibly even to the January production reports. But, here again, too, I mean, it's just not granted, Mexico, phenomenal buyer of corn the last week or so. But that said, we're not really being overrun with demand here at this time.
Yeah, we're still behind on the trailing pace that USDA has said we're going to have on exports. So given that, those two factors, Mexico and other export sales, what's a range you see, let's say in this March contract that you see moving forward?
Well, I think if we get 20 cents higher than we are today, we've probably maxed out what we're going to do on.
How long would that be before to reach that 20?
Granted, as I commented even this morning on the newsletter, usually we talk about who gets the Thanksgiving turkey, and right now, who is it? The markets have been so stagnant for months, but I would say probably by Christmas, we should have those kind of rallies in there. Maybe we'll test it back and forth several times. I mean, that's realistically all we've done for the last 2 to 3 months is just trade back and forth in the same range. So I don't see anything in the news right now that takes us out of there.
We'll discuss turkey more in Market Plus because I did have that question from your newsletter this morning. I wanted to ask you about.
All right.
Let's move to soybeans because we have China and Brazil instability politically, especially Brazil on the presidential transition. We just saw the story about China. So my question is, I guess, again, as a global one, is that the biggest story right now in soybeans?
Absolutely. I mean, we know China has been a substantial buyer in U.S. beans as of late. Now, granted, I think the big thing that's probably going to keep the beans market supported for a while is they still probably need to price the majority of these beans, and they won't do that until they actually start loading it. But they're going to pick up the supplies they need from us probably through the end of the year as they assess what's happening in South America, most specifically in Brazil. I mean, Argentina just had some challenges, although things are improving a little bit down there right now. If Brazil produces the type of crops that are projected to happen, 151, 153 million metric tons of soybeans, the demand's going to go right back there, and we're probably looking at a pretty dour outlook into next year on the soybean market. But there's your $1 million question: what will the Brazilian weather be for the next 2 months? Right now, off to a decent start.
So Scott in Augusta, Wisconsin, he already answered your question there. So I'm going to follow up now, Dan, with a range question.
Sure.
What's this? Well, again, I'll use the deferred month that we talk about. These things are in a pretty tight range. We're about to see the range in the last 4 months really fall much tighter. What's the range moving forward for the next 4 months?
Oh, I really think I think the range really stays the same. We've been 1360, 1370 on the downside to maybe a 1430, 1425, 30 on the upside. I think we stay within there. Again, unless there is a major weather issue would materialize down there, I think that caps us on the upside. So
the range stays. Home on the range, home in the range. Is that what it would be? Let's talk about this cattle on feed report.
Yes.
We need to kind of dive into this one because there's a bigger story that's developing. Initially on feed, 2% below, 98%. Right. What's that tell you?
Well, I mean, I think the people are looking at the economics and saying, it's why risk the money here at this point in time? We've had a pretty good year up to this point. Probably the bigger number or the more friendly number was the placements. If I recall, we're 4% down. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so looking out into the future, and you've already got a market that seems to be pretty tuned to reacting to the bullish news. So I think that could be the catalyst that maybe gets us into some higher highs. Are we going to get carried away to the upside? With all the inflationary scare that's already out there, with the talk of recession, I don't think people are going to go wild on what they're doing at the meat counter. But that certainly doesn't mean we couldn't see February cattle work up into the 158, 159 range in the meantime.
To button up the placed in October 94%, on feed 98%, marketed 101.
101, right.
Let's go to you mentioned the meat counter. We saw boxed beef have a little better week. There's this discussion of, I'm not buying the prime, I'm going down the line. Do you see that?
Well, certainly. I think people are they're going to watch their P's and Q's when it comes to what the money they spend. You haven't seen people really pull back dramatically as you reviewed earlier. Retail sales still 1.3% better last month. That said, those numbers have continued to slack a little bit each month. They're not quite as strong as they were, say back in the middle of the summer. So it's the demand's not going to go away. I mean, and again, the good thing is, all meat, I shouldn't say good, all meats are high priced, compared to each other or compared to historical averages. So it's not like I can go to, get these extreme bargains here or there unless somebody's running some kind of a feature to get you into the store to buy their other goodies. But
well, that's the story in the retail picture. Walmart had a good third quarter because a bunch of their business has become groceries.
Right.
And people are going to Walmart to shop to save money on groceries because food has gotten higher. Target, I believe, was off 52% year over year. Now, last year, it's kind of how we started the show. Retail sales had been up because the retailers were pushing everybody to shop. So that's a little bit of a bloated factor. But bloated is one thing, inflation is another. Does the pressure of food weigh over this market more than the interest rate does?
Oh, and granted, not that interest rates don't affect us in so many different categories, but yeah, I think food takes precedence over everything else. I mean, it's interest rate is part of the picture, but unless you're out borrowing money or if you have a ridiculous amount of credit card debt, which is interest rates are going to hit you hard all the time if that's the case to begin with. But sure, I mean, I think the food price is going to tend to make people be bargain shoppers, and just like you say, of course, the Target thing is interesting, and I think that's probably more a reflection of Target's management, that they've not necessarily held their inventories as well as
Kohl's
Walmart
had the same problem.
Sure.
They miscalculated on what they were going to buy, and we weren't buying what we had.
And what the consumers wanted at that point. So correct. Right.
All right. So given that those over large picture. If I'm a producer at home looking to expand a cattle herd, knowing what I know could be coming, am I trying to find some feeders right now?
And again, I guess I probably wouldn't go too heavy as far as the weights on there, but sure. I mean, I think it's if the economics are there, if you have the feedstuffs available to do it, why not? I mean, I think moving into the first quarter of next year, it looks pretty respectable.
All right, hog market. That was looks like the bulls are kind of hanging around there.
A similar situation there. I mean, we've and granted, I think part of this is predicated on some hope that China is going to be a little little stronger buyer of pork out there, which may or may not be the case. We know, the hog industry has just been in flux over there between health issues and unprofitability and now shortages of meats. So chances are they will be a buyer in there. But boy, we have already pressed up to some pretty lofty levels in the deferred contracts. Not that we couldn't get higher, not that we haven't traded higher than this before, but boy, very rarely. So it's, granted the hog and pig report, we'll get another one here in December, but I mean, the hog industry was not really expanding. So, I mean, keeping the numbers in check keeps the outlook at least positive, but boy, to push a lot higher than we have already here, I think is going to be difficult.
Our outlook is we have to say goodbye.
Okay.
Goodbye, Dan.
All right.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
That's Dan Hueber, and we're going to put a pause on this analysis, and we're going to continue our discussion and answer more of your submitted questions in our Market Plus segment. Find that on our website of markettomarket.org. That's in podcast form and also on YouTube. All of these resources, by the way, are free. The easy season for great images is when there is work in the field for planting or harvest. Now is when we find out how creative our friends can be and then share their work with you. Plus, we have content of our own available right now at Market to Market Show on Instagram. Give us a follow there. Next week, we will look at how food insecurity is still plaguing America. Thank you for watching. Have a great week.
Market to Market is a production of Iowa PBS, which is solely responsible for its content.
What's the most complex industry on Earth? It's not genetics, or meteorology, or logistics. It's a business that involves them all. It's farming. Thank you, farmers, from Pioneer.
Tomorrow. For over 100 years, we've worked to help our customers be ready for tomorrow. Trust in tomorrow. Information is available from a Grinnell Mutual agent today.